All right. So, hi, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Pilgrim. Yes, yes, yes. I know that it's been years, 2 years, I think, since I last posted on this channel, but we are reviving it. It's 2024, and there are many stories to be shared. About what has been happening in my life since the first 6 episodes of Pilgrim were flighted on the television and the television series for South Africa, South African Broadcasting Service, SABC. And once that journey ended, a lot unfolded. This particular podcast isn't about that. It isn't about a catch up on what has happened. I will do a separate podcast to share what has been happening with me since I walked that powerful journey with plant medicines, with breath work, movement, etc. Different ways of making my way, waking up to my God self. Right now, what I am going to do is to have a conversation with a dear, beloved, soul companion friend of mine about my journey with Vipassana. And she's right there, as you can see her, looking all beautiful. Thato Zanele Khumalo, welcome. Thank you very much for doing this. Would you
Thank
like to say a
you.
few
Thank
words?
you. It's such a pleasure.
Mm,
I just love how you said soul companion friend and the phrase that came to mind because as you know, like Ian Van Zandt is my teacher. I consider her my spiritual teachers, one of. And she says of friends who are women, she says, uses the phrase sister woman friend. And I feel like that's what you are to me, like soul sister woman friend. So I'm going to like steal that and borrow it and change it a little bit and say soul sister woman friend, which is what you are to me. And am so grateful for our friendship, for our sisterhood, for our companionship
mm, mm,
along this journey called life,
mm.
to waking up to ourselves. I love how you use the word God self because that feels more and more about what this journey my own life journey has become for me. And I've loved our many, many conversations um,
Yeah.
around yours and mine. So thank you. Thank you for
Mm,
having me on.
my goodness. It's a pleasure. I couldn't think of anybody more fitting to have this conversation with than you. And yeah, and also how you're creating space for me also to be able to claim that, yeah, this journey is about waking up. It is about enlightenment. It's the only journey that I know that for the both of us is the most meaningful path. It's the most meaningful, audacious act that we are
Mm,
I mean, and I don't know what it's a life. It's a life of that is aligned to enlightenment and being able to openly state that feels quite big. I think in the past I used to hide and make, nyinyi farts and make it as small as possible. But it isn't about that anymore. And I think that some part of that, part of my giving myself permission to do that openly. I mean, obviously, with the previous episodes of Pilgrim, I did that.
mm,
But to be able to articulate it, even to myself, to hear myself say it here, feels quite significant. And
mm,
I'm grateful to have you as a companion, someone
mm.
who is, we walking each other back home. Mm.
Yeah.
And I another reason apart from our connection, another reason that it is really powerful to have you here is because you too have sat for Vipassana, have done the 10-day silent retreat. and have come out with your own gifts. And what I would love to invite us to do is that we go in and out from whatever you remember of your own journey. I'm sure there are many lessons that have been imprinted upon you that perhaps you can bring in. And certainly mine are a lot more fresh because I've just done it in January, the beginning of January. And so I would like to share what happened for me in that process, and then but we'll really wait for your prompts to ask me to activate my own thinking and my memory around what I would like to share.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, absolutely. And also you've done it, well, I've only done it once, several years ago, and you've done it a few times. So I think also in this conversation, um, there might be also a revisiting for me, you know, and maybe I might also inquire about a revisiting for you, having come back into it. I mean, of course, this last experience is very fresh, you know, it was just in January. And I also want to honor and acknowledge like the previous experiences that you've had having sat before. And so to bring those into the mix as well,
mm,
in my prompting and in my inquiry about your experience.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
It,
Can
it
I kick it off and
Yes,
ask, or is there
please
something that you want to,
do it.
just
Do it.
yeah. Okay. So, I mean, just right off the bat, like for me, my experience of sitting for 10 days was extremely challenging. It was hard, you know. I mean, there were, of course, moments of like that I experienced as breakthrough. But I mean, for you to have done it now a fourth time, if I'm not mistaken, and then fresh in, through into the new year of 2024, like I'm like, wasn't it hard? Wasn't it hard for you? Like what coming in it, when you're in it and then coming out of it, what was your experience like?
All right. It was hard. There's no
Mm,
going about it, saying it differently. It was hard. But it was hard in an interesting way. It was hard, and at the same time, it was rewarding the hardness. It was rewarding. There was a reward within the difficulty, within sitting
mm,
in the difficulty. And so it almost made the difficulty purposeful. It
mm,
made the pain, there were gifts that were imbued within the pain. And I'm amazed that I was as dedicated to the sit as I was. The first time I did Vipassana was in India, in Kolkata,
mm,
and it was the most intense experience I'd ever undertaken. It was the hardest. I mean, I was crying. I was in tears most of the time. In fact, I think that by day two, that's how quickly the pain I mean, the pain is there right from day one.
mm,
But I
mm,
think by day two, I
mm,
had managed to create this beautiful nest for myself, just so that I could be nice and comfortable. And there's no being comfortable in Vipassana. You know, you're always just you're just always in big, deep pain. Um, and oh, it says my internet is unstable. Um, I was in deep, deep pain, and I made this beautiful nest, something that I felt like, okay, I can sit in this. And
mm,
the holder of the space, it's not the teacher, although we can call them the teacher because the main teacher is Goenka. But the person who holds the space, um, an old man, he came, he called me. As you know, in Vipassana, you have moments of having a conversation with that person, with the teacher. And they're really checking in to see how's your journey going, how's your meditation going, are you getting the technique correctly, because there is a technique. And he called me, and I crawled over to him, and I sat in front of him, and he said, "How are you doing?" And you know, and the tears start coming because I feel like, oh, he actually cares about how I'm feeling.
Yes.
I'm okay now that I've found some comfort, you know, I've created that comfortable space.
Mm.
And he says, yes, I see you have many cushions, he said. I said, yes, yes. And he said, take them away.
Wow.
And I immediately cried. The tears spontaneously rolled down my face, really spontaneously. And I think from then on, I was just tuned out. I couldn't be present to Vipassana.
Yeah.
But obviously something stuck because I went again. And the second time was massive. The second time, I think I did it in, I can't remember, 2014. I can't remember. 2015. That could have been my second or my third time. I actually can't remember. And
Yeah.
and and in that episode, I kept having, throughout my time there at night, I kept seeing fractals. I kept seeing visions. My eyes open up very quickly. And I just kept seeing visions all the time at night. All my eyes open or closed, I would just keep seeing visions. The third time, I can't remember when I did that. I think I had an expectation that something massive would happen. And when nothing massive happened, I tuned out. So I was outside, I sat outside, I was bored. I kept thinking, what the heck am I doing here? You know, I was just really quite churlish about it. And until last year came, and last year asked me to go back to Vipassana. And I was going to go at the end of last year, but I was too tired. Vipassana is incredibly demanding physically. So I was too tired and I decided, I'm rather going to start the year with it, which was, it was really big because I had decided that 2024 was going to be my big year of initiation. And Vipassana was completely that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Oof. Oof. I love that word initiation because we've also had conversations in the past about how 2023 was a year of completion for you. So I find it so interesting that the initial idea was to have it at the end of the year, right? And such as it happens, it was meant to initiate. It was an initiatory experience and process for you,
Right.
so you completed what you were able to complete, what you needed to complete in your completion year of last year, and then boom,
Yeah.
initiation
Yeah.
um, by Vipassana.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what happened. And it so happened that I completed my year in a different way. As you know, I built a labyrinth on my property in my garden. I walked the labyrinth 7 times a day and was in deep. I couldn't have planned the depth of my solo retreat. But I was taken deeply in, and I went into my retreat from the 25th, from Christmas. I spent Christmas on my own, and I was in retreat until the 1st of January, until the evening of the 1st of January. And the 10th of January, I was at Vipassana. So it does feel like I needed to end in a different way. I needed to end the year in a different way, complete that cycle in a different way, so that Vipassana could bring me to exactly where it needed to bring me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So,
And where was that? What was the initiation? What made it an initiation,
yeah.
for you?
So yeah, and maybe this is a good spot to start sharing a couple of my experiences there that made me realize that Makgati, this is a different ball game altogether.
Yeah.
I think I brought a certain maturity inside of me. I agreed that I'm just going to show up. Doesn't matter what arrives for me. I'm just going to show up and I'm going to accept whatever comes with Vipassana. Whatever Vipassana brings me, that is exactly what is needed in the moment. And I think that for me, certainly, being able to recognize that in the past I had gotten into my own way by all my expectations, I think that was quite big. Anyway, so we arrive, and the males have their own male quarters, and the females we have our own female quarters. And if you don't know anything about Vipassana, one of the things about it is that you have to surrender all your devices. You can't have your phone with you. You can't have any computer. Any technological devices are disallowed. So in other words, you are completely, it's almost like taking the vows. It's like becoming a nun or a monk for the 10 days. And so in that way, you are completely inward. It's a silent retreat, which means that you don't speak to anybody. In fact, even eye contact, any form of communication is prohibited. And no writing, no, you can't burn your incense, you can't, so all the different spiritual activities that one participates in, you're discouraged from continuing those practices, just so that you can fully be within the experience of Vipassana. So I surrendered all my things and went into my room, and I set up my bed. I made my bed and made it just so, and made it as pretty as I could, because I was, spending 10 days, in fact, 12 nights in that space. It's a fair amount of time. And a couple of us, when I finished, a couple of us women were wanting to go and get a cup of tea. So we walked down to the kitchen and made a cup of tea. And we're sitting outside and chatting. This is before the beginning of Vipassana. Sitting outside, chatting. It's about 3 p.m. or something like that. And as we are connecting with one another, suddenly I have this massive fatigue descend upon me.
Wow.
And this is not typical of me, but I just got up and I said, everybody, please excuse me. And I just left, and I went to my room, and I took off my clothes and I got into bed and I slept. I actually fell asleep. And I slept until about 4:30. So I slept for over an hour, and I got up and I went to have dinner with everybody else. And I mentioned that because it's not typical. I'm not the type of person that takes naps in the day. It's not.
I have to push you to take one when you need it.
The nap ministry should be writing the prescriptions, and so I mean, I feel like there was some energy that I needed to pull in order to prepare for what was to unfold. Anyway, so I'm going to share, and in no particular order, because
Please,
you can't bring any writing material, and so things just are sitting inside of me completely unarranged. A couple of things are arranged, but most of them are unarranged. But I will share a couple of the things that I noticed that stood out for me. Number one is that on day one is not the day of arrival. Day one is our very first day of meditating. And I noticed as I was walking to breakfast. Now, breakfast is at 6:30 a.m. We wake up at 4, sit for an hour and a half, and then at 6:30 it's breakfast. And as I was walking towards the dining hall, I saw on the path, it's in the bushes, on the path, along the path, I see there's a snake curled up, a black snake curled up, and it's quite scaly. And I mean, a snake conjures up all sorts of things in people and in me in particular. So immediately I retract, and and I have a conversation with myself. Should I go back? Should I take another path? What should I do? It's quite near the path. It's a little bit in the grass, but it's quite near the path. But I decide, no, I'm going to go. So I gather all
Wow.
my courage and I walk past it. And then, of course, I run. As soon as I walk past it, I sort of, walk as quickly as possible towards breakfast.
Yeah.
Later on, as I go to lunch, again, I'm walking along a different path. And as I'm walking, again, I see a snake and it disappears into the grass. Okay. Okay. This is going to be interesting. This is going to be interesting. Okay, fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not going to make any meaning of the meaning of the snake. I mean, we know that a snake is a powerful symbol in many different spiritual traditions. But I'm not going to take it any further than that for now. Um,
Can I say though, what I did find interesting was the questions that you asked yourself when you saw the snake. Am I going to go back? Am I going to go forward? So that there's something about that moment which I feel marks or serves as something of a threshold of like making a conscious choice, you know, like whatever the answer to that is, but there seems to be a big moment of like, I'm faced with something. I have a moment to choose. What do I choose? And then you step forward into that choice.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happened. I mean, thank you for highlighting that. And the significance of that, yeah, is well worth noting. Um, and a couple of other things that don't have too much to do with the meditation itself, but the ancillary stuff that was happening around my time there. Early on, and this could have been on night one, is as I was lying in bed, I close my eyes, get ready to sleep, and the visions begin. I get visions very quickly, and the visions begin. They're quite lucid. And one of the visions is of a mud pool, a mud pond. And it's very, very muddy, brown, muddy pond. What is interesting is that there are these bubbles that are coming up from out of the pond, and they're popping. They rise up, pop, rise up, and I'm looking at them in my lucidness, and I'm thinking, oh, those are interesting. I wonder what this is about. Gosh, I wonder if this is an indication of what's happening inside of me that that I'm not even aware of, but I will leave this to Dhamma. Goenka, who is the teacher, talks about leaving things to Dhamma. And Dhamma, can be seen as truth, can be seen as the path, as the way, as the Tao, as the Taoist would say, or even as God. I mean, Buddhism would never speak of God, but anyway, so I go, that's interesting. Let me leave this alone. And the first 3 nights, now I wrote some notes coming back home in order to capture things. One of the nights, another one of the nights, as I'm lying in bed, I have a vision of these 2 circles. Like when you blow, when you when you have that liquid and you dip that circular thing, and then you blow on it and
the
it creates
bubbles,
bubbles. I have a vision of one of those bubbles, and it is going clockwise. And inside that bubble is another bubble. And that bubble is going towards me. It's turning towards me. So there's 2 bubbles. One is turning clockwise and another one is coming. It's not rotating outward, but it's rotating inward. And I look at them and I think, I don't know what that means. The 2 bubbles they really look like those blow bubbles, catching the light, catching the iridescence of the light, the rainbowy type colors of the light. Another one, now this I think happened on one of the first sits that I had. My eyes are closed, and with my eyes closed, in meditation, I have a vision of this massive stone that is round, massive. And it's clearly a stone, but it's big and it's round and it's right in front of me. And as I'm looking at it, I see it, it turns like a dial, just like a watch with a face. I think it's analog, one of those. Not a digital watch, but one of those, and it feels like the hand of a watch, of a clock, just went into the
Yeah.
next, the next
Yeah.
dial, the next thing. And as I'm looking at that, and I think, oh wow, that's interesting. So that went into that stepped into the next phase, whatever the next phase is, whatever the next
Yeah.
and I think that also was telling for me, because it felt like I've being taken out of the current into the next,
Mm.
whatever the current is and whatever the next is, but it felt like
Mm.
I was being assisted, or my
Yeah.
timeline was being timeline into a different timeline, into a different,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
A marked shift of something coming
yeah,
into place in a new configuration.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to go into the experiences themselves.
Mm.
Um, so the first 3 days, we are taught how to breathe in a manner that focuses the attention. And it's Anapana. The practice is called Anapana, and it's really about focusing the attention to make it laser sharp. And you get to breathe, focusing your entire attention to the just the outside of the nostril. And you're just focusing there. And you can imagine, morning, daytime, nighttime, you're just breathing and bringing your attention to that. And it is intense, and yeah, there are many different things that can happen in that time. And it's only on day 4, and it actually the afternoon of day 4, that we get introduced to Vipassana. And
Mm.
so all this time I'm sitting on the floor. We get to sit on the floor. And typically in South Africa, they don't mind. And I imagine in non-Asian countries, they probably don't mind a person sitting in a chair or sitting however way that is comfortable for you. And so going over the speakers does say, find a comfortable seat. And for Vipassana, he says, find a comfortable seat, find a comfortable posture, and once you find it, commit to not
Yeah.
moving out of it for the
Yeah.
duration of the 1 hour of that particular sitting slot.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
easy. So,
I see why you want to do all those pillows and cushions in that first one. Just wanted to be as comfortable as possible.
oh my gosh. So, and
Yeah.
I've got knee issues, I've got hip
Yeah.
issues, the issues are many. Thank you very much. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
day 4, okay, I eventually find my seat, and I'm comfortable, and then the recording of Goenka as he gives us the instructions of how to do Vipassana. And I'm not going to go into the detail of how to do it, because it'll just take too long.
Yeah.
But he reminds us the whole practice of Vipassana is about recognizing things as they are and being able
Mm.
to accept things as they are. No
Mm.
imagination, no fantasy, no stories, nothing. You just accept things as they are. And the way you do that is by paying attention to what is happening inside the body. what he reminds us is that, this isn't a religious practice. It's about
Yeah.
your own direct experience. And so,
Experience.
and so you get to pay attention to what is happening in my own body by focusing on the sensations. You start from the top of your head and you travel all the way down to the bottom of your feet, to your toes, paying attention and recognizing that all the time there are sensations, there is movement. What is that movement? That movement is a reminder that even though life may look solidified, it may look apparent at the apparent level, everything looks like it is solid. But at the real level, nothing is solid. Everything is in constant movement. Everything is vibrating at a particular rate. And so what he takes us to is paying attention to ourselves at the atomic level, as tiny, actually as particles and waves, and recognizing that nothing in me is solid. And as he says this, tears just run down my face. And I cry as I'm sitting there through the meditation. And what I cry about is, and I wrote this because this was so big for me, that I want to actually read just a few words that I wrote about why I was crying. So I'm sitting there, we go through the meditation for that hour, and at the end of the hour, we take a break and I go and stand outside and I'm crying. Of course, you can't speak to anybody. So I'm crying by myself. I mean, crying by myself, but I'm crying and I'm looking. And the location of the retreat center is in the mountains, and you just get to look down at a valley, and there's other mountains further up. It's really beautiful. So I'm standing there and I'm looking at these mountains and I'm crying and crying. And I cry realizing how my life has been determined by empty air. Everything is ephemeral. It's changing. Nothing is constant. Even the me that I see as me is simply an amalgamation of atoms vibrating, frequencies waving as particles. And I bring a story to them and I give these particles something to congregate around, a mass of made up stories. Then I believe that mass to be me, and then go on a life that protects it. So what that is, events happen. I grasp the event and I give it substance by giving it a story, and I make it real. And I have created a whole life based on one thing that came that could easily have moved as energy. Energy is constantly moving, but I have grasped this energy and I have solidified it by giving it a story. And then I have held that story to be true and to be me, for me to be made up of that story. And I realize how I have done that with all my life. It's made up of stories.
Mm. 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 That's huge. That feels so hugely significant. That awareness and the visceral experience of coming into that realization in that moment. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And the way I get to have the experience, the way I make the meaning, the understanding is as I'm sitting in meditation and intense pain comes. It does come, obviously. Intense pain comes. And because I have taken this thing that, okay, I'm going to sit in it, I'm going to observe the pain. it comes and it's big. And I just sit with it and I go through the technique of observing, of observing. As I observe it, it shifts. The mere act of my observing it, it shifts it. And it shifts it into intense pleasure, almost orgasmic pleasure.
Wow.
That exquisite pain becomes exquisite pleasure. And it's like the very same neural pathways. It's not even like a different one. It's exactly the same one. I give it observation, boom, it turns into something else over and over and over again. And I'm like, oh my gosh. All my life, I have been protecting what I don't even want.
Yeah.
I have had all these experiences of displeasure, and I've just like hung on to them and protected them and created stories around them. Whereas I could have just observed.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful thing, because what Buddhism teaches us is that what the Buddha said is that life is suffering, and what is the suffering is our tendency to cling to what we think we want, to pleasure, and the aversion to displeasure, to pain. So we have an aversion to pain, and we have this clinging to what we see as pleasure. And in fact, because life is all about energy, it's just made up of energy. Energy just
Yeah.
wants to move.
Yeah.
And when you allow it to
Yeah.
move, it doesn't have an opportunity to create a story. And what happens to the story is that it descends deep into our unconscious, and then it rules our lives. It governs who we are. And
Yes.
then we find all the unmetabolized traumas that get repeated over and over and over again. So
Yeah.
the point of
Yeah.
liberation, what brings us liberation, is being able to sit in whatever comes without clinging, without running away, and allow it to move. And what he says is that in Vipassana, we practice in that way. And when you sit, more things come up out of the body, and they come up and you sit with them, you sit, they let go, they get released out of the body, and they get released. So it's a cleaning process. It's a massive cleaning process of releasing all the sankharas. He calls them sankharas, out of the body. And the sankharas are those solidified, unmetabolized stuff.
And what's beautifully fascinating to me is that you, Makgati, did not have to do a thing. There isn't a doing that you initiate of yourself. It's just observing. And what I know of myself and many of us humans, right, is we do that clinging. Like we want to somehow change it, control it, fix it. At least I do. The impulse to, oh, this sensation coming up, this pain, that creating a story and attaching to it and then making it something that it isn't, or that it may not be, and then running with that, and so like just the beauty and the gift of just being able to observe it and allow it to just do its thing, right, without you having to actually do anything.
Yeah.
That's just so powerfully freeing, I would imagine. And there's a liberation to it. There's something liberating about having to just allow,
Yeah.
to just observe,
Yeah. Yeah.
to just surrender to something that I think already knows how to do, like the sensations know how to sensate, if that's a word,
Yes.
and
Yes.
we're just observing it.
Yes. And
Sure.
what I'm appreciating about what you're saying is it reminds me of, this is why he says, don't bring anything. All your practices that you've done before, don't bring them in so that you can really see the power of this particular
Yeah.
technique. And the
Yeah.
technique, all it asks of you is you sit, nothing else. And as he says,
Yeah.
you leave the rest to Dhamma. As he says, Dhamma knows what to
Yeah.
do. And that is a powerful thing. I mean, if
Yeah.
you come from a God-centered type focus, you can say you leave it all to God. And you
Mm,
let the Spirit of God move through you without attaching,
mm.
without aversion, and you allow it to do whatever it wants. It
Yeah.
knows.
Yeah.
It knows.
Yeah.
I don't have the frame of reference. I'm not standing on top of a mountain and looking at myself and seeing, okay, these are all the actions that I need to take, and I don't have that inside of
Mm,
me. But there's
mm.
something greater inside all of us that knows. And all we have to do is to just be and allow and trust, show up with faith that Dhamma knows, that God knows, that the universe knows, or whatever the language is.
Yeah.
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 I'm
Ooh.
gonna share another experience.
Mm,
Um, I mean,
mm.
there's about two more, and I don't want this to be too long. Um, in one of them, in one of the experiences, um, and I don't know on what day. Oh, another aside, I get, oh my gosh, I forgot about this. One of the things that happens in my sit is that I have this intense, I keep smelling dog poo. Like,
Okay.
and I'm sitting right in front. I'm in the first row. And there's a small window. There's a couple of small windows in front. And there can't be dogs. I haven't seen any. There won't be dogs. But there's
Yeah.
this smell of dog poo that just keeps permeating. I get a whiff that hangs
Mm.
around and then it goes. And then I notice that at different periods, I get massive hot flashes that are not related to I don't, I haven't, I don't get hot flashes anymore. Menopausal related hot flashes. I don't get them anymore. But
Yeah.
here in my meditations, I get massive hot flashes and everything I can feel myself burn up.
Yeah.
And with that burning comes the smell. This massive, disgusting smell of dog poo.
Dog poo.
And I realized that it's my sweat. It was me that was smelling. And then I realized that my breath stinks. I realized that my armpits stink. I mean, I was just a mess of smell throughout
Yeah.
my time at Vipassana.
Wow.
I was emitting many, many, many smelly things out of me.
Wow.
So much so that one of the days, I had diarrhea the entire day. Um,
Mm,
but I'm going ahead of myself. Let me go
mm.
back. So maybe on day 5 or day 6 or
That's
something.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. On day
The
5.
the image I have is that, sorry to interrupt, but the image I have is that what you presented earlier of like mud bubbling up to the surface, so the smell of dog poo, the hot flashes, the sweat, it's all just bubbling up
Exactly.
to the surface.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Sure.
And at some point, I remember thinking, is my body dead? What is happening? Why? Because there were these flies that kept at me over and over and over. Just all around me,
Yeah.
all around me, over and over
Yeah.
and over and over. I
Yeah.
had many different bugs on me. One time, I had an ant. I didn't know it was an ant until I had to. And I opened
Yeah.
my eyes in the middle of, and I saw I thought it was a fly. It was walking on me and it
Yeah.
traveled and I thought it's a fly. It's going to go. I'm determined not to move. It comes and it
Yeah.
goes. And then it jumps over onto this arm and it goes up. And then it disappears. And I think, oh, thank God it's gone. But it was actually on my clothing. I was covered. Next thing, it's on my neck. And I'm, I didn't realize I had such a sensitive neck. And it's traveling like, oh, this fly. And it's traveling my neck. And then it comes all the way around. Like it's like a decapitation.
Wow.
All the way around. And then that's when I went like this and I saw that it's actually an ant that had gone all the way
All the
around,
way around.
around my neck, the whole circumference of my neck. Anyway,
So much I can read into that, but I won't.
right? Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another one of the sittings that brought me some wisdom, some self-realization is um sitting there and I got to, I can't remember what he said. He said something that got me to see how I have been clinging to a story of scarcity in my life, scarcity particularly around love and romance. And
Mm.
I mean, I think from day 4 onwards, I cried just about every day in
Wow.
my sitting. So, and I'm
Yeah.
sitting there and I'm crying because I'm realizing how the feminine inside of me has closed. I think he speaks about giving with you, receiving with your, giving with your left and receiving with your right, or something like that.
Mm.
And I'm realizing how the feminine in me has closed down to receiving and hasn't opened up
Mm.
to receiving. And I'm just at going, going, going and doing, and softening to allow myself to receive isn't something that I'd done before.
Mm.
And I go to speak to the holder of the space, let's call her the teacher. Um,
Mm.
and um, and she says to me, I didn't speak to her about the detail of what was happening, but she says to me, yeah, but remember, that be the light that you are, you are the light, be the light that you are, be the lighthouse that you are, and allow the ships to come to you. You don't go out to the
Mm.
lighthouse, doesn't go out to the ships. You just remain and the ships will come to you. And I mean, I cried and cried
Yeah.
as I was having a conversation with her. And she also said something pertaining to my power. And I
Mm.
didn't
And
know,
she doesn't know you?
doesn't know me.
She knows
First
nothing
time,
about, wow.
first time,
Okay.
first time
Wow.
meeting her. And she said, and as I was walking out, and she says to me, you don't recognize your own power. You don't see, you are such a powerhouse and you don't see your own power. Wake up to your
Mm.
own power. And
Mm.
I walked out, okay. And I know that the power is something that I do grapple with. And I realized much later throughout my meditations, my throat chakra, it was just completely irritated all the time. So I was coughing or clearing it at no other time other than when I was in meditation. No other time. So and the throat, of course, it's the center of power. It's the center of that expression of
Yeah.
self-empowerment. And I think she was picking it up from there that your body's telling many stories there. Um,
Mm.
and trust that. So
Yeah.
my waking up, this is also part of the initiation that I was talking about. I want to share the next 2 stories, and I see that we're going on to an hour, and I don't want this to be too long. But the 2 stories. Anyway, one of the stories is, I think it happens on day 8. Day 7 is when I had the diarrhea. And
Diarrhea.
and the day 5, when I saw how much I don't allow myself to receive and how I don't honor myself.
Mm.
I walk around the center in my break, in the heat, it is so hot. And I walk around and I do a hoponopono on my
Mm.
entire body. And I apologize to my mind for not trusting it, and apologize to my senses, and apologize to my eyes. I do
Mm.
my entire body. And I'm crying as I'm doing this
Mm.
forgiveness practice, and then I do a gratitude practice. Thank you. I do the same thing with my entire system. Thank you. And I thank all of it. And the following day, I woke up with the diarrhea. Lots and
Mm.
lots of diarrhea. And it was so excruciatingly painful that I had to give myself
Sure.
some Reiki. So I gave myself
Wow.
Reiki, and I did more Ho'oponopono forgiveness on my stomach, on my entire, that system, the gut area. And then and the following morning, and I said to my body, look, when we wake up the following morning, I'm going to be completely clear, because, I still have, I do wake up feeling good. This is day 8.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and actually, I wake up at about 4:30. Supposed to wake up at 4, because 4:30 is the beginning of the sit. And I'm
Mm.
dancing naked in my room in the dark as I'm getting dressed, and I'm singing in my head, and I'm dancing, and I put on my clothes, and I go to the room, to the hall for the meditation. By this time, I'm actually sitting in a chair. I've asked if I could sit in a chair. So I go backwards and forwards. I sit in the chair, or I sit on the floor
Mm.
front. The chair is at the back. So I'm sitting in
Mhm.
my chair, and it's really comfortable. It's a chair with cushions on
Mm.
it, and some cushions on the floor, so my feet can get a bit of an elevation. And on this particular day, we get introduced to there's another layer to our practice, and in fact, we get asked to know that sit is going to be a little bit longer. So if you need to go use the
Okay.
bathroom or whatever it is, go and do it, so that when you come back, we'll sit and know that it's longer than the typical hour of the instructed sit. Fine.
Mm.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm not feeling anything. We start the practice, and I'm not feeling anything. I'm not feeling any sensations, but it's fine. I still show up, and I go from the top of my head. And each time, when I pay attention, the sensations arrive, and I see that, okay. So it's a very slow practice. Very, going down slowly, slowly, my eyes, my mouth, very slowly, and everything. When I bring my attention, I can see the sensations wake up. My body sort of wakes up. My attention wakes my body up, wakes the
Mm.
sensations up. But it is painfully slow. But I'm like, it's fine. I'm just going to show
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
slowly, slowly. And then at some point, the body wakes up, and then there's these intense sensations that are, the energy is just running up and down my body. And as it's running, I immediately think, Makgati, anicca meaning, remember, everything changes. So treat everything
Mm.
with equanimity. Don't attach. Just notice,
Mm.
allow, and as I tell myself that, he says, if you are getting any pleasurable light sensations, remember, anicca. Allow them
Yeah.
to move through your body without attaching. And I'm like, yeah.
Mm.
So my body is moving all of this energy up and down, up and down. And as it's moving, suddenly I get this pain in my solar plexus, just below my breasts, in just up that area up there, a little bit lower down, the top of my stomach, below my breasts. And
Mm.
it starts like an agitation, a painful agitation. I'm like, what is that? Anyway, I continue to sweep my attention throughout my body. The pain intensifies. It gets worse. And
Mm.
I think, it gets so bad that I say to myself, I'm going to observe this. He does say observe. So
Yeah.
in my mind's eye, I pull a chair and I'm gonna sit with myself. And I say, no, I can't pull a chair. I'm gonna pull a stool. So I pull a stool in my mind's eye. I pull a stool and I sit next to myself and I
Whoa.
observe the pain that is sitting inside of my body. And it gets
Mm.
worse and it gets bad. And then I'm thinking, and then I say to myself, it's okay. Sit with it. This is probably a sankara coming up. This is probably an unmetabolized energy or something, a trauma that is sitting inside of my body. It might not even be out of this lifetime. Therefore, sit with it. So I sit with it and I say, it's okay. We surrender this to Dhamma. It's okay. And it
Mm.
gets worse. It gets worse. And now I'm thinking, it actually feels like my stomach is folded over. But I'm not even folded over because I'm sitting in a chair and there's no
Yeah.
folding. There's nothing. It's must all of me is just open, but it feels like I'm contracting in on myself like this.
Mm.
And it gets so worse that I can actually feel tinnitus in my hands. I can feel
Mm.
my hands just contracting in pain like this. And I continue sitting with
Mm.
myself and I try to sweep. And the pain gets so bad that I start repeating some of the chanting that he does. I don't even know what he says, but I start chanting to myself.
Yeah.
And I start saying, it's okay. I feel like I'm going to die. And if I must die, so be it. And the
Mm.
tears, it's so painful that the tears are running down my face. And then I'm feeling like maybe I've shot somebody in the stomach in a previous lifetime and I am
Mm.
experiencing their pain. And if that's what it is, I am here for that. So I sit with that.
Sure.
And I do, and then I ask for forgiveness. And I do, the pain gets worse
Mm.
and worse and worse. And and then next thing by then he's finished instructing and he says to people, if you want to go continue meditating in your room, you can do so, or you can continue meditating in the hall. So some people are walking out. I can hear people are walking out, but I can't move. I am deep
Yeah.
in this. And so, and then at some point I say, I am worthy of my own forgiveness. I forgive myself. And as I say that, I can feel it sort of, if something has been holding like this, I can feel a loosening and it opens
Yeah.
up slowly and it opens and then finally I can breathe. And then I feel the pain starts moving from my solar plexus and it starts moving upwards and it moves. It's intense. It's moving
Yeah.
up, up. As it moves close to my heart grabs it. My higher heart
Mm.
grabs it, and it's now beating. I can feel my heart boom, 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 boom with this thing. And it's beating on the right hand side. I'm going to show you like this. It's beating on the right hand side of my
Mm.
upper heart. So it's not even, and it's just going boom, boom. And I'm like, I'm sure this is on my right hand side. It's forever beating on that side. I'm thinking, but why is it only
Mm.
on my right hand side? And I haven't moved, and I almost want to take my hand and put it there so that I can ascertain that it is on my right hand, but I don't.
Mm.
And the next thing I can feel it, my heartbeat going boom, 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 boom. It's moving up my throat, and it's in my right throat. And then it goes back down again towards my heart. Boom, 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 boom. As it gets close to my heart,
Mm.
there's an echo on the left, dum, 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 dum. And then, so there's a beating going both sides, the right and the left,
Simultaneously.
beating both sides, going on either direction, boom, 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 boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom, going. And then, jum, jum, they turn, they meet each other, boom, boom, up my throat, up my left throat, dum, dum, the two of them, boom, 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 past my lip, dum, dum, going up, boom, boom, past my left eye, boom, boom, beating, beating, past my third eye, boom, past my right eye, down, down, beating, 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 past the right. When it gets to the heart, circle, circle, circle around my heart. And I'm like, gosh, that's interesting. I'm sure that's finished. I wonder what that is about. Circle, 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 circle. It's not finished. Next thing, I feel one, not two, one in my throat. Boom, boom, it's beating. The beating continues up my throat, past my lips, past my nostril, past my third eye. And as it moves towards my crown, it's so strong that it's actually pulling my head down like this. And then my head is even nodding. And I'm like, oh, I am nodding. I am saying, yes, this is my yes. And then I'm also told, yes, you are bowing. Okay. And then I'm back. And then a voice says, it's over, Makgati. You can move now and you can go. I open my eyes, I open my hands, and what was that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't even go to my room. I think by now it's almost lunchtime. And I go and I have lunch.
And how's your body feeling at this point after all of that?
It's let it go. It's released, whatever it was. No clinging, nothing.
Wow.
Nothing.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. Another experience is I'm back sitting in that chair. Now, after having this, I'm like,
After all of this,
after
yeah.
all of this, I'm like, I'm sure it's done. I'm sure my Vipassana is finished because that was massive. That can't be followed by anything else. I'm back sitting in that chair in meditation. And suddenly I feel like I'm sitting unevenly, that my right is lower than my left, or my left is lower, but that I'm uneven. And I know I'm not uneven because my cushions have been exactly the way they've been all this time.
Yeah.
And there's more pain. My solar plexus did a lot of work. So it pulls all the pain and it takes us to the solar plexus and it works it in the solar plexus. But again, I realized my relationship, how the lack of harmony. Actually, the pain started because it was in the root chakra. I realized the necessity of working at the root, starting with my root chakra and healing that area so that by the time it goes up into the solar plexus, that it is healed, that the energy has moved and it's healed energy. But that was one of the things that made me realize how important it is to do a lot of healing around my sense of, the first root, dealing with issues of materiality.
Safety.
Yeah, and safety in the
Safety and
world.
security.
Yeah,
Yeah.
safety and
Yeah.
security. And so bringing my attention to that, and constantly I did a lot of work around the area, around the perineum, around the sexual organs, bringing a lot of activation around that, just with my attention. And then fast forward, and I'm really fast forwarding here. But the last thing on the last day, so the root work was on day 10. On day 11, everything is finished. We have our last meditation before we leave, our last 4 a.m. meditation before we leave. And by then I'm back sitting in front on the floor, and I'm like, all our Vipassana is finished. This is really just the last sit so that we can bring it to a close. So I'm sitting there. I find a comfortable seat eventually. Next thing, I have this intense pain under my breast, on my left-hand side. And I'm like, oh my God, it feels like, are you still there? I see we're frozen. Woo! But I'm going to continue. I feel like somebody has stabbed me in my, I don't know, in my left-hand side there. I feel like somebody has stabbed me. And the pain is excruciatingly painful. It's so sore. And in its painfulness, I'm like, oh, I'm going to speak, even though I've lost Zanele there, but I'm going to continue sharing. But I feel like somebody has stabbed me in my left-hand side, and the pain keeps moving. It keeps moving all the way, all the way, all the way. It moves all the way across from under my breast, and it comes back. It comes into my solar plexus, and it is sitting in my solar plexus, and it is intense, and it gets worked in my solar plexus. When it gets to my solar plexus, my heart also gets activated. My heart takes it, and I hear a voice saying, your mission has begun. Continue your work. And that was the end. And I see I'm receiving a message from Zanele. Let me see what she says. She got kicked out. Oh, her computer has frozen. It's okay. But that was my experience of my Vipassana, continuing all the way until the very last minutes of my time there, until the very last sit of my time there. And I constantly felt like this is a plant medicine journey. This feels so reminiscent of my plant medicine journeys. It's so intense. It's more intense than I could ever have anticipated. And I'm continuing to sit with metabolizing a lot of what happened there. And more has arrived since that sit. One thing that I've continued to do is I've continued to meditate, to do Vipassana meditation. Goenka invites us, the main teacher invites us to sit twice a day, in the morning and the evening, an hour each time. I haven't done that. I only sit 1 hour in the morning. I will eventually get to sit 2 hours, but for now I'm sitting 1 hour, and it is intense. Vipassana is intense. But I'm going to end this sharing for now. And really thank you for sitting with it. I know this was a long one. I promise all the others won't be this long, but this needed to be as long as it is, because it was a sharing of a particular experience. And I thank you for persisting to sit, for continuing to sit with me. And may we be happy. May we be in harmony. May we be liberated from all our suffering. Thank you, beloved Pilgrim, for sitting with me, and I'll see you in our next episode. Kalerato.